All right, so welcome back to the channel, and today, obviously, it is another Q&A session. So, without any further ado, I guess obviously most of my stuff will come on from my phone. So if I am looking down, I'm not being rude or anything. It's me just looking at my phone for the questions. And if you guys have any questions, as always, just type them down in that little chat bar, and I will get to them ASAP. Now, without any further ado, I should probably state what I'm wearing. So wrist check. I'm wearing my Rado Hyperchrome. It's actually a really, really cool watch. But anyways, so on to the first couple of questions here that I got asked. If I can get to it. All right. Oh boy, we got a couple ones. Okay, so favorite watch brand or couple overall and why? So this is one question that I was asked. What is my favorite watch brand? My favorite watch brand is Omega, by far and large. They are one of the coolest watches, or at least watch companies out there, in my opinion. They have a lot of heritage behind them, but overall, they just make some really, really cool pieces. And I mean, they've done a lot of cool things. And when we're talking about horology, they've just had a lot of really cool achievements. You know, I mean, I guess you could say first watch on the moon. I mean, I don't know if that's really like craziest thing, but you know, official watch NASA, the official timekeepers of the Olympics. I think that is in and of itself something kind of, special, especially when it comes to like, the Olympics being something that's super obviously competitive and have to be accurate when you're keeping time. But yeah, so it's something that I find Omega definitely. Rado I like as a company. I know they're a bit of, I would say, like, I mean, they've been around for a while, but like their iteration kind of when they became kind of Rado, the one that we know now. I like them because their innovative usage of materials, and I think that it's something that at about the $2,000 to $3,000 Canadian price point, you're getting a lot of watch for the money. Like with the Rado Hyperchrome. I know that a lot of people think they're a bit of a one-trick pony with the Captain Cook, and there's not a whole lot out there that people really pay attention to outside of them. Honestly, here's my opinion. Go take a look at like the Golden Horse series or the Hyperchrome. I know the Diastar is a little funky looking, but it is what it is. Those are probably my top two favorite brands. But yeah, I know that, I mean, especially with Rado, they're not really that popular here in North America. I know that over in Southeast and South Asia, they are super popular, but they don't necessarily get the love they deserve over here. So that is the answer to that question. Obviously, if you do have questions, just drop them down in the bar and I'll get to them. So it says, are you looking at getting a different car? And if so, what? No, I'm not looking to get a different car. I have two cars already. So for those of you guys who don't know, I do have my 1990 Honda Prelude that I do feature on the channel quite a bit. I know a little bit. It's been a little bit lacking, but it is what it is. But so I have that one. It's a, what do I have in there? Oh God, JDM F20B. So out of the Accord SIRT, and then I also have it's 4-wheel steering as well, 5-speed. 5-speed has to be 5-speed, obviously. But yeah. That car, and then I also have an E92 335i. So if I'm looking to get a different car, no, those cars are running perfectly fine. Really, I don't really plan on getting another car just because it's expensive, and I'd rather put my money towards watches right now, to be honest, and also have to save up for a house. So that's besides the point. Okay. Got another question is, why don't you do more watch reviews? Okay, so there's a couple reasons. I like to do watch reviews. It's just one problem is, generally speaking, my videos tend to be on the longer side, which isn't necessarily a problem. I mean, some people like very in-depth things. I just find that I don't like, how can I say this? I don't like it when people when they're very, very brief with a topic that could be discussed in great detail, right? So if I want a detailed video, it's perfectly fine because it is what it is. But if I wanted something very detailed, and then I don't get those details out of the video, and I'm just watching it, it's maybe like 4 or 5 minutes long, because that's optimum length for YouTube to get lots of views. It's hard for me to it's hard for me to actually cram all that information in and try and make it that way. So it's like, for me, doing reviews is a little bit more on the difficult side, try and get all the information in a I would say an appropriate time period, which kind of does suck, if that makes sense, because there's so much that you like. as a content creator, I want to include. But sometimes, I mean, obviously, I can ramble on. I know I do ramble a little bit. I mean, some of my former students will tell you that, man, I could talk for days about stupid stuff. I could just talk. It's easy to talk. It's easy. I never really had an issue about like when I remember I remember always having to plan and prep for basically public speaking courses or anything in university when they teach you how to speak in front of a classroom. They'd be like, oh, you don't really have any problem like coming up with stuff to talk about. It's just like there's not so much stuff that like you can really include in that 5-ish minute mark where it's like I really feel like you get the point across to people where it's like you can dive in and get every single detail and every single thought out about the watch, because sometimes 5 minutes doesn't just justify it. And it's like, and then when I take into account like how long it takes for me to make the video and like edit it, and I understand my editing skills aren't the best, but it's just very, very time consuming for something that, I mean, my latest video, right, the one on the Battle of the Sarbs, or the Battle of the Alpinists, the Sarb 017 versus the Prospects models. I mean, when generally speaking, videos that are almost 20 minutes long don't get a lot of views. So it almost seems like it's almost counterproductive for me to want to put the time and effort into those very long videos when I know there's not really going to be a whole lot of views on them. I mean, the people that do watch them, they're very, very happy with them. And that's great, but it's kind of disheartening when you put all that work into it and no one really pays attention to it. I'm not just whining or anything, being like, oh, woe is me, go watch my stuff. I don't really care about that, but it's one of the reasons why I don't really do a ton of reviews. Or certain things. The other thing is like a lot of people get watches sent into them. Whereas I've gotten a couple watches sent into me. I mean, the HMT watches, that video is actually doing pretty well. So thank you very much, Chris, for sending those watches in, one of my subscribers, one of my buddies too. So he sent me some watches and I reviewed those, and that video is actually doing pretty well. So you can go check that one out if you want. But overall, the other thing is obviously I do buy and sell watches, right? So it's part of my business. If you want to go look at CarRox watches, go take it. It's on Instagram. That's CarOx WATCHES. So CarRox watches. But yeah, so it's like if I were to start reviewing watches that I'm selling, it's a little bit, it can get dicey because a lot of people would be like, oh, you're just pushing a product. And I don't want to be seen as one of those guys who just uses YouTube to push a product, right? I mean, yeah, I talk about it a lot because it's something that I'm passionate about, and it's a revenue generation for me. It's something that actually makes me money so that I can keep doing, all this stuff, and I sitting around and I mean, I guess making videos for you guys and doing other things, but it kind of comes down to just, it helps me cover expenses, right? And it helps me further my, the hobby, right? So I don't really want to just be seen as like, oh, I'm going to review these pieces and try and sell them. I mean, obviously my idea is that I want to produce the most, unbiased opinions on these timepieces, which I mean, if you're selling them, you're going to try and promote only the good side. So it's kind of like, especially paid reviews. Like paid reviews are one thing. So like, it's just, I don't know, but will you see more reviews? Yes. Will I try to be like, I try to be as unbiased as possible, right? For instance, my last video with the Sarb and like the Battle of the Alpinists, with those ones, I'm even selling that Sarb. That Sarb 017, that's part of the inventory of CarRox watches. So it's there for sale. I do give my honest opinions of it, and it is what it is, right? So it's kind of in that vein. But yes, reviews will be coming, so don't worry too much. But they do. It's hard to get my opinion on. I know I just rambled a lot. Okay, so what else? Oh boy, I have to scroll through all these. So I have this other question. Have you ever had a pissy watch experience, basically an example would be like basically some guy coming up to me and either being extremely douchey about like the watch I'm wearing, or just being extremely rude to me in general, like comparing whatever they're like. The example here is comparing like Daniel Wellington to like one of my Oruses, or like my Orus or something like that. Not so one of, I gave away one of my Oruses. But I haven't had a lot of negative experiences per se with wearing watches. And actually there was another question that actually, no, I should answer another question that I got with that one. So the other question that I got was, do girls notice watches? And I would combine that with, do people notice watches? Do girls notice watches? Not really, to be honest. If you think that by buying a certain watch that girls are going to notice what's on your wrist, no. Unless they might say that, oh, that's really pretty, and they might talk about it, and then be like, oh, it's expensive, whatever. But unless it's like, it's kind of, how can I put it? They don't really. A lot of girls don't really care, to be honest. Not many women really are into watches, and honestly, I think it's a shame. I think it's a great hobby to be in. But yeah, so, and then combining is like, do people notice them? And I say the people who notice them. I mean, if you're my girlfriend, you kind of notice watches when you're. I mean, obviously, because it rubs off on you because of me. But I mean, you can notice watches when you work at one job, and hopefully get better tips from it. When you work in a restaurant, you mention the watches, talk up the customers, and hopefully get a better tip out of it. And I know people in the service industry do that, right? They notice things because it plays into the person's ego, right? If there's a guy sitting there with a Breitling or something, and you notice how this Breitling, and you're like, oh, that's a really cool Breitling. You have a little short conversation about them, the watch, and then all of a sudden they might send you a little bit bigger of a tip out on the meal. So there's that. But I mean, general speaking, when I go out to the mall, I'm not getting noticed with watches, really. I mean, it's just something that doesn't really occur. People don't really notice it as much as they like to think about it, right? You might think, oh my goodness, I'm gonna be super flashy. I'm gonna show off my watch. No one really, unless you're a watch enthusiast, most people don't really care. Most people, I mean, you could say actually, no. If you're wearing like a Rolex or like maybe an Omega, it's kind of, wearing a Rolex is kind of like driving a Mercedes. People know what it is, but do people really know what it is? They really care? It's gonna stop you and ask you about it? No one really cares. Okay. I mean, but I honestly don't really like Mercedes. That's it's kind of I would compare Omega more or less to, if we're comparing car brands, I would compare Omega to BMW. That's my opinion, because I like BMW. I need water. Okay, but anyways, back to that question of bad experiences or with people and with watches. And people comparing and being douchey about it. No, people haven't really been douchey to me. I've had some interesting experiences where you try, and I remember talking to this one guy when I was out. This was a few years ago, before they closed down all the bars and clubs and everything. I was out at a club, and I remember this one guy was talking about what was it? I think it was an MVMT watch. And he was saying about how it was the best thing ever. And I think at that time, I think I was wearing my vintage Omega Seamaster. And he's basically saying that it was basically a piece of crap. And he's like, oh, it's old, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, these things are so cool because you can change the straps. And I literally thinking to myself, I'm like, you can do that with literally almost any watch, unless it's an integrated bracelet. And I was just like, I'm like, okay, all right. But I mean, the guy was drunk, right? So I'm not, you can't have a coherent discussion with a drunk person. I think that was a guy I remember that night was a really interesting night. That guy it was the fiance dumped him or something or whatever, and he's just crying. He's at the bar, and I was just like, this guy needs to be consoled or whatever. I'm not usually, you're just approach random strangers at the bar and just be like, hey, how's it going? But I mean, sometimes when you're sitting alone in a bar and don't look so good, maybe check on them. Who knows? Cheer them up. It could mean a lot to them, But I mean, that was kind of maybe a dumb experience. I mean, I've had people say, why do you spend so much money on watches? Or, wow, it's oh, that's stupid. Why would you spend that money? It's my $10 Timex keeps the same time. Or it's oh, my Apple Watch does this. I'm like, it's the same kind of, I would say the same kind of sentiment is why do you mod your cars? Why do you care about driving the cars that you drive? It's something, it's a hobby. Not everybody's going to get it. So I'm not here. When someone says, oh, it tells the same time as a $10 watch. Yeah, I see those memes going around a lot, and those people that propagate things, it's oh, it doesn't matter if you have a $300 watch or $30 watch or whatever. And I'm like, true. If all you care about is telling time, but the point is this is a hobby for us, right? Same with, it cares about, oh, okay, so Jake, you say you wouldn't marry anyone with an MVMT either. Okay, good point. But no, yeah, so realistically, the biggest part about that was that I've had those experiences where people just say, oh, I don't care about, I don't care about it. And really you're not really going to argue with people who just don't care about your hobby. It's that same response is the same kind of response when you're talking about your modified vehicle and how much you love a vehicle, how much you're really into cars. And they tell you that they can get to the exact same grocery store with a Corolla or a Civic. that's unmodified. And I'm not bashing on Corollas or Civics. I guess I could say Cavalier or something. Crapalier. There we go. But those people, those kinds of people don't care about your hobby. So when people don't care about the hobby, they're just going to trash it, right? They're going to say, oh, well, this does the exact same thing as blank, because they see the problem with, and this is more of like a philosophical kind of thought. The problem with these hobbies per se is that they're utilitarian in purpose, right? So like a car or a watch, right? They serve a dual purpose, right? A car gets you from point A to point B, right? You drive, you pick up your groceries, you can go to Home Depot, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I mean, certain vehicles do certain things better, right? Certain watches do certain things better, right? Like the same way as like a pickup truck has more utilitarian purpose than, you know, like an Econobox, like let's say I'm trying to think something like a Volkswagen Golf. Actually kind of interesting because my girlfriend just had that as a rental vehicle. And that's actually not a bad car. The build quality of the Golfs, I would say, is actually not that bad. Considering I'm not like a huge Volkswagen fan. Not a bad little car. But the problem with these things is that they have such a utilitarian purpose that some people forget that there are people who view these as more than just utilitarian, right? So if I were to be like, oh, well, I'm going to buy a watch, I want that watch to reflect something about me, or like I want it to complement the style. I want to dress it. I want it to be a certain way. I want certain complications. I collect them for, you know, various purposes. And people don't really understand that because they're like, oh, like, why is actually the same question is like, why would you drive two cars? Why would you have two cars? It doesn't make sense to them because they don't understand that, like, one you drive in the winter, one you drive in the summer, right? And I mean, you could talk about that, and then once you explain, it's like, oh, it's prevent rust from forming on the summer car. You don't want to get all banged up, blah, 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 stuff like that. Then it becomes a little bit different, right? The topic then changes a little bit. Then they're like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. But at the same time, they're like, oh, that doesn't make sense to me. So it's like when you have those conversations, in my opinion, it's almost better to just let them be rather than try to change their opinion. Because to be honest, you don't really like, especially using the sledgehammer approach. A lot of enthusiasts with any sort of hobby use the sledgehammer approach to try and change people's opinions or minds on a topic. And it's not really a good way to work at things. And I think, honestly, if I start telling you how great all these things are, and you're sitting there and you say, I don't care, that because their mentality when they make those statements is an I don't care statement. And when someone doesn't care about something, it's awfully hard to make them care, right? You're arguing and you're going upriver, right? You're going against the flow of the current. And yeah, you can make them care. You can make them see your side, but realistically, there's some people who are just going to be like, oh, watches are bad investments, watches are this, and I personally think watches are bad investments. Don't invest in watches, and maybe I should make a video about that. But yeah, like overall comments that like I've gotten on certain pieces is like people don't really notice them. I've had a couple of people notice certain pieces that are maybe a little bit more out there, right, or iconic. I mean, like a takeaway or aqua racer. I had one guy just stopped me in the mall and he's like, oh, like is that an aqua racer? I was actually waiting in line to get into the store story, and he was like, is that an aqua racer? And I was like, yeah, it is. So it's like some people do recognize things, but overall, like, I mean, most people aren't going to tell you that your watch sucks. So even watch enthusiasts, even us, right, as enthusiasts. I mean, most of the people watching either channel are either car enthusiasts or watch enthusiasts, and you hate it when people bash on your hobby, right? But watch enthusiasts, I'll like, I mean, I've even had decent conversation with people who literally just wear cheap quartz pieces, and like, I'm not talking like good in any sort of way. I'm not talking like Citizens or anything like that. I mean, like, because they don't really care about the hobby, right? So it's like, and I don't mind having the conversation where you sit there and you're like, oh, hey, like what are you wearing? And if they say a Daniel Wellington, they say some fashion brand, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to bash them because they're wearing something? No, you're probably you're not going to make any friends doing that. Number one, you can secretly go home and laugh about it, or go to the bathroom and literally crap all over them in your mind and say that's the dumbest thing they ever put on the list. How could they spend the money on it? But if you really want to get people in the hobby, that's not how you do it, right? I think 99% of these people will eventually, like, kind of transition over if they're into watches. I mean, some people just want something to tell the time, and you can't argue with people like that. There's going to be people who's like, oh, what do I watch in 2021? It's completely useless. I have my cell phone. Okay, well, those kinds of people, you're like, like, okay, I can argue with you, but do you really want to hear the argument? It's kind of like, it's more of like a shutdown, right? They're not really open to the idea of conversation because they don't really want to have the conversation. They don't really want to talk about it. But anyways, I think I've droned on for that way too long. But anyways, next question that I got. Okay, so any advice for buying vintage pieces? And then it says, besides the obvious, buying used stuff, are things to be aware of with use over time? And then like maybe in relation to, I guess, maintenance. Sorry, it's a kind of a little bit weird, the weird wording. Basically asking, do I have any advice for buying vintage pieces? And what should you be aware of when buying vintage pieces? Number one, I would say buying vintage pieces is okay. I would say always expect there to be hidden costs. Okay, I'll give a very good example. And I don't want to bash the seller on this. I just wish they would have been more honest, right? And I don't want to be rude to them. I just think that they should have been more honest on this. So I purchased a watch on eBay. The seller had great reviews for the most part. I think like 99% positive feedback, which is good, right? When you're looking on eBay, always go for positive, the best feedback possible, right? Now, he said, or he, I don't even know, could have been anybody, who cares? It could have been a computer for all we know. Okay, so they said that this vintage piece was serviced. I bought this piece for my girlfriend, and it is a vintage Rado Purple horse. Actually, basically the ladies' version of this guy. It was a 22 millimeter, which is a tiny little piece. But I bought it because then my girlfriend and I could have like a matching set, which was super rare. So it had the fluted bezel, everything like that. And the indices were like the same, even had the magnified date window. So the average price on it they were about, a few $100s. This one was obviously quite a bit cheaper. I didn't really they had good pictures, right? I could tell it was a genuine piece. I mean, I know Rado fairly well. Vintage Rado is a little bit of a minefield because of, how bizarre their catalog system was. They used leftover case backs. They're not as well documented as Omega. So it's a little bit more difficult to figure out, fake or real, but realistically, you should be fine if you can spot some certain telltale signs. But yeah, so what ended up happening was when the seller sold this to me, he said that it was serviced. So I get it in the mail and I'm just like, okay, so I get my girlfriend to wear it. It drops about 4 to 5 minutes a day. And I was just like, oh boy, okay. And he said it was recently serviced, like a month ago. And I'm like, didn't come with a service receipt. And that should have been my first tip off. If it's been serviced, at least a service receipt, or at least something saying it was toyed around with. So I'm like, hey, that's not right. So I take it to my watchmaker. And so and meanwhile, the seller is like, oh, can I get my feedback? I still haven't given the guy feedback. And I was waiting and I was just like, yeah, okay, so here's the deal. I was just like, no, I'm not going to give you feedback until I hear back from my watchmaker. My watchmaker basically tells me, and he's like, look, whoever serviced this, a trained monkey could have done better. Basically, he wouldn't have been surprised if they popped open the case back, blew some air in there and tried to mess around with it and try to regulate it, but butchered the job. So lo and behold, they asked you to get a full overhaul. Mind you, like, whoopity-doo, $200, whatever, I'm out. It doesn't really bother me too much, but it is hidden cost, right? So that's my story. Is you even if the seller is really good on eBay, and I mean, eBay is a minefield in of itself. I know a lot of watch enthusiasts that will not purchase product from eBay or pieces from eBay. And they would rather spend their money and go to someone like, for instance, a good example, Omega Enthusiast. He runs a YouTube channel. He runs an Instagram account. Great guy. I think he's based out of Vancouver, if I'm correct. And he stocks vintage pieces. And they are, but the thing is, you pay to play. His stuff is top notch. However, it's expensive. You're not going to find a $500 Omega Seamaster from him. You won't, because he took all the risk. They're serviced usually. He took all the risk and now he's selling the product, right? Honestly, he deserves to make his dime, right? His money, his coin. So I would say just don't bash it, right? The other thing is when it comes to vintage watches, just be aware that they are old. They don't match up to modern standards in terms of, you could use the power reserve, features that we've become really used to. I mean, for instance, hacking and hand winding, this wasn't really a common thing on a lot of entry-level pieces. Even like, for instance, even my Rado Purple Horse, my vintage Rado Purple Horse doesn't have hacking, or it has hand winding, sorry, but it doesn't have hacking. But yeah, so it's like even pieces like that. I mean, my Sakura doesn't have hacking. No, yeah, it doesn't. It's just, yeah, it is hand wound, but it's a hand wound. So it's a hand wind, not automatic. But these pieces, you have to remember that they're not like, they don't have the same set standards for pieces that they do today. Another good example would be the quick set date function. I know that the Vostok amphibious do not have a quick set date function, and it's something that we've become very, very used to. And I mean, it's a pain in the butt to go through and have to go change the date, go through it. Or I mean, there's the trick where you bring it back to about 9 p.m. and then jump it between 9 p.m. and about 4 a.m. to get the date change over quicker. But even so, that's a pain in the butt. It's not as easy to just, take it off, take the watch off, cycle through the date wheel, and boom, you're done, set it. So certain conveniences that we've come to take for granted on modern watches that aren't necessarily there on vintage timepieces. I guess the other thing is you have to pay attention. It's like water resistant. You might be buying a vintage diver, but should you be using it as a vintage diver today? Probably not. I mean, the seals might be all worn out. It depends. I mean, maybe your watchmaker got new seals, but yeah. Yeah, okay. So the other question that I got in here, I'll find it on here, in regards to vintage, is why I don't usually sell vintage. Or we're saying, why don't we see you selling a lot of vintage pieces? So number one with that, and I'm going to kind of go back to what I was saying with the vintage piece in general and what to look out for, is that it's with vintage timepieces, there is a lot of risk, okay, as a seller. So when I go to pick up stock for Cardox watches, I have to think, is this piece a good piece to try and move? Right? Will it be a popular piece? Sometimes vintage pieces are great. I mean, I've had people offer me vintage Omegas, and I love vintage Omega. I love Omega as a company, right? But for me, I have to think about this. I have to think about the price of the watch, price of servicing, parts, and it's like the list keeps on going and going and going, right? So for me, all of a sudden, even if I get an Omega Seamaster by basically, let's say $500, $600, or sometimes they want $700, if it hasn't been serviced, I'm saying this is wholesale price, not retail price, right? So if these pieces haven't been serviced, that's gonna like $200, $300, boom, just on top. So now all of a sudden, my investment into this piece, if I bought it at $500, now it'd be $800, or if I bought it at $700, it'd be $1,000. And now let's say the going rate for these watches in pristine condition, whatever, is only $1,200. So let's say, and because vintage collectors are very, 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 very particular and picky. So it's very, very hard to sometimes satisfy them with certain things. They're like, oh, is everything all original? And you're like, if you're nothing short of getting your watchmaker to, check every single part, it's kind of hard. I mean, a lot of people, some people don't like, they'll be like, oh, were all original parts used to repair the movement, blah, 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 stuff like that. And it becomes one of those things where it's very, very tricky to sometimes try and sell these pieces. A lot of people love vintage watches, and it's a great way to experience brands that you normally wouldn't be experiencing for a good price point. Like you can get a vintage Omega, and a decent vintage Omega between anywhere from about I would say like retail prices, you about $800, about $1,500, and you can get yourself into about and Canadian prices, by the way, you can get yourself into a really a decent vintage Omega. And I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. I would say that just be wary. Just be wary about the cost parts and stuff like that. And this is kind of why I kind of like to choose stuff to sell that has the lowest overall maintenance cost, or in terms of like that it wouldn't need maintenance in the sense of like if it's new, right? Because then it's just when it gets to that 5 to 7 year mark, people, they're worried about servicing. When it's a 30, 40-year-old watch, people are worried about servicing. So that kind of, hopefully that answers the question in regards to why I don't really have a lot of vintage pieces for sale and why I don't sell a lot of vintage pieces. it's just there's a large risk with them, and it's just a little bit difficult to offload them because people are very, very picky in particular. That's just my opinion. I mean, obviously it can change. I mean, there are very successful stores out there that primarily deal in vintage. I know that one guy in the Canadian Watch Club, basically all he sells is vintage pieces. I can't remember his account, his website. Otherwise, I would link it for you guys. I can't remember it. Maybe it'll come to me. But he does a good job in finding some really cool vintage pieces and selling them. The Omega Enthusiast, great guy. I've kind of had a couple of chats on Instagram with him about certain things, but he knows his stuff. If you have any questions, go bug him. He really, really, really knows his stuff. He's a smart dude. And he also has his store. So then again, you're paying the premium. And it's a lot of people don't want to pay that premium. They'd rather just go shop for deals, right? I mean, people are cheap. So at the end of the day, I'm cheap too. So hopefully that answers the question in regards to vintage. Oh, I got another comment just in regards to okay. It's kind of a funny one. It just a comment in regards to the other section was talking about like people being douchey about stuff. A comment that I've seen a lot of sentiment from certain people is that how do you respond to the people that say anything under $500 or X amount of dollars is trash? Like, let's say $500 and anything that's not a luxury watch is trash. And I would say to those people, you're not really, I don't know if you're like, how can I put it? Okay. For me, I like watches. A lot of the watches that I wear on a daily basis range between about $2,000 to $3,000 MSRP value, right? I love my Oris Aquis. I love my Aqua Racer. I love like the Rado Hyperchrome. And I mean, obviously the vintage Seamaster is a little bit different, but at the same time, I mean, I have some of my watches with me right here, but at the same time, I love my Vostok Amphibia. So my thing is that you can't really be, in my opinion, a seasoned watch collector or someone who really, really appreciate watches without having a couple beater pieces in your collection. Now, I would say, obviously, I say the biggest difference is once you go past about $2,000 to $3,000, like in that range and kind of beyond, it gets very difficult for you to want to go back to wearing some of these entry-level pieces because realistically, they're entry-level, right? And it's hard to want to, like, I mean, you could say experience them. It's like when the quality is vastly superior. A good example would be my Orient, what is an Orient Mako USA 2 with a polar dial. So the white dial. I wouldn't say polar dial. That's kind of weird. But I do like that watch. It's just that I find it's very difficult for me to want to, like, I try to wear it because it's like it's on a rubber strap. The thing is, my Oris is on a rubber strap. Which watch do I really want to wear on a daily basis? My Oris or this Orient? I'm not saying that the Orient's a bad watch. I'm just saying that it's just the Oris is so much nicer that, there's watches that are really cool. But it's like certain things. You're gonna probably, when you go to your watch box every single day, you're probably gonna pick up those pieces that are usually higher end, unless you have like a really great connection with certain pieces. Like for me, the Vostok, I love that piece. I wear it all the time. But usually when I go out, when I'm doing stuff, I usually gravitate to wearing certain pieces because I like the build quality. I like the fit and finish of it. I like the the ornateness of the dial. And it's just sometimes these lower end watches, or I mean, a lot when I say lower end, I mean these entry level pieces don't have that. But would I say like these pieces are garbage? No, I wouldn't say it. There's great value to be had in an entry level, right? There's great value in general. And I think that sometimes you overlook really, really cool pieces because you're not willing to buy quote unquote entry level pieces. And I think that when we look at enthusiasts and we crap on them all the time who do this, who purchase these pieces, it doesn't create a good environment. I'm not one of those people who just like, I know there's a lot of the people that are on the other side of the flip side of the spectrum that are like, oh, I wouldn't spend over $1,000 for a watch. That's just excessive. It's stupid. Okay, well, and then they can, they're usually buying like whatever AliExpress has on sale, or weird like homage watches and stuff like that. And I'm like, and their most expensive watch is like some sort of like maybe a Seiko Sarb or something like that. And I'm like, okay, all right then. Like, yeah, I mean, those people are there, and I'm just like, okay, well, all right. Like, as I said before, you can't really argue and reason with everybody, so there's not like the biggest incentive to kind of go that route, if that makes sense. I would just say, like, keep it civil. Usually people like that, they're like, it's really hard to reason with them, so don't even bother with it. Just kind of ignore it and just kind of move on. Yeah, I mean, you can sit there and duke it out, but realistically, you're probably not going to get anywhere, and you're probably better off just kind of chilling and going somewhere else, realistically. Okay, so a couple more questions. What do you think of the Timepiece Gentleman kind of debacle? Ooh, okay, all right. So for those people who do not know kind of what happened, I'm giving a very paraphrased thing. Basically, Timepiece Gentleman, big YouTube channel, blew up. He's a gray market reseller or gray market dealer. Mostly deals in very expensive high-end pieces, which, you know, obviously I don't. Most of my pieces I really deal with capital about the $2,000 to $3,000 range. But so very high-end stuff. Basically, he goes MIA for like, what was it, about a week or something like that, and he has a boat ton of basically money and watches that were, you know, kind of on consignment. He had just taken this like business, like he's basically like, I guess it wasn't like a Kickstarter thing, but it's basically like this thing where you can basically pay a certain amount of money, and basically you're buying into this company that he's starting up or whatever. Anyways, turned out he was like doing this blackout for charity purposes, which honestly, okay, first of all, that's on a realistic standpoint, that's no way to run a business. It's stupid. Like, that's just dumb. Like, you don't just, especially when you have people and you go blackout, you go cold, you move all your like stuff away from your retail front, where you're the retail store, and you kind of like, you go like nothing, lights out, and it looks like you just skipped town. Don't do that. Why? Because everyone gets panicky. And yeah, okay, cool. You generated a ton of PR, but it wasn't good PR, and people are really pissed with him. So I mean, do I hate the dude? No. Do I have any quarrels with him? No. Do I really care? No. Like, I mean, like I think that what that was a miscalculated step. That's what that was. That was just a big screw up on their part. And I think it's really bit them in the butt. Do I think that they should have gone with something else? Maybe, but I don't really know in general what I would have, like, how I would approach this, right? Like how I would fix their problem. But I do know that what they did was just a really, really, really bad move, right? It's kind of like in chess when you just like, you took a pawn with your queen, and then now something else takes that queen. You done screwed up. And realistically, like, I just, in my mind, I'm trying to understand the logic behind it, because it doesn't make sense to me. Like, it literally does not make sense why they would do that. It's just my opinion. I understand they're trying to donate to charity. I understand they're trying to raise awareness and saying how social media affects all of our lives and we're too dependent on it. But when you have, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of either inventory, consignment stuff, and all these other things, and other people's money for this business, and you go blackout on them and you make it look like you skipped town, people will panic and people will not be very happy, and they will be very highly unlikely to trust you in the future. Doesn't matter if he basically took his reputation in an environment where reputation literally means everything. In the watch community, the reputation means everything. You took that and you basically wadded it up, threw it in the toilet, and flushed it. That's what he did. It was really, 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 really dumb. Okay, that's my opinion. I don't want to get too much into it because it's like, it's been beat to death. It's dead horse already. It's been about a week. Yeah, just no. Like, it was stupid, plain old stupid. And I'm not trying to belittle him. I'm not trying, like, I mean, he's a way better YouTuber than I'll ever be. Like, this guy's smart. This guy has connections. I just think this was a big misstep and it was dumb. I do hope that he recovers from it. I hope that he can make amends. And I hope that, you know, it can, his channel and everything he's kind of built forward can move on. but I think that he made a big screw up, and he has to kind of own up and confess, or not really confess, but, own up and be like, yo, this was a bad misstep. We screwed up, rather than just trying to play it off. Because right now they just tried to play it off like nothing, and it was we're the dumb people. Okay, so no, man, don't do that. We're not stupid. We're like in this kind of sphere. We're not dumb. So please just don't do that. Like, I respect you guys, but don't do that. Don't ever do that again. You screwed up once, right? So I don't know how many chances the watch community will give you, because you took a lot of trust away, and you affected other people's business, right? So Federico Talks Watches, probably one of my personal favorite YouTubers. I mean, he had a couple pieces pulled from consignment. He even was talking about it with the effects of what happened to him. People don't want to really trust him anymore. And I mean, he is like, dude, like, man, if I had watches that I need to sell, I couldn't sell them myself, I would definitely bring them to him. And I would trust that guy with my watches. Federico Talks Watch, man, super cool guy. So if you haven't seen his YouTube channel, go check it out. Yeah, he's probably one. If I could ever do like a collab with any like the big watch YouTubers, that'd be the dude, man. I'd want to do a collab with him. He's super cool. Maybe he'll watch this one day. You'd be like, oh wow, but chances are he's busy doing other stuff. And I could pick that guy's brain for like days. He's super crazy. Oh, thoughts on Urban Gentry. Okay, so I guess another question that kind of just got bumped in. Thoughts on Urban Gentry. Do you know what? Honestly, I know there was a lot of drama with him. For instance, what's that? Bear Clooney Watches has his YouTube channel. He talked about what is it? Basically the kind of the beef that was going back and forth. Here's my opinion. When it comes to watch related drama, I try and stay out of it, especially when it comes to in the groups. I don't want to put myself on either, the quote unquote no fly list of watch people to deal with. And as I said, like, I'm relatively new to this game. I barely have a clientele. I started a business. I have to build it up, and I don't want to shoot myself in the foot before even really starting. Right? So when it comes to YouTube, same kind of deal. I'm a little guy. I don't get paid for this. I don't want some guy coming down on me and saying that I'm the worst on planet Earth. But I don't really have an opinion on that. I think that overall as a YouTube channel, I think he provides decent content. It's a bit long-winded in my opinion, kind of, I guess, like me. He's a pretty thorough guy, so I don't mind that. I think there's some antics to his channel that I think are kind of bizarre, but I do know that a lot of stuff that I believe a lot of his product or a lot of his reviews are paid reviews. Now, I mean, someone could correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, obviously, you could get like a guy like Paul Pluta, who's I find absolutely hilarious. Who does paid reviews. Like, you have to pay him to send a watch in, and then he'll review it, which I guess is a little bit different, because I think you're just paying him for his opinion on the piece rather than paying him with the piece or whatever. Companies give stuff like that. But overall, I don't necessarily think that I don't really have any issues with the Urban Gentry. I know that there's certain things that say he's like some sort of monster or whatever. No, I don't really have any issues with it. I don't know him. I just watch his content for what it is. It's kind of like if someone would be like, what's your opinions on Michael Jackson? Good songwriter, or good performer. But I don't really know a whole lot of the personal stuff. I wasn't there to experience everything, I mean, as a kid, whatever. I don't know. Like, I don't really pay attention too much. I kind of like, in a lot of ways, I try and see public people as public, right? I'm like, just do your job, whatever kind of like, I mean, yes, it can affect you, whatever you do in private. But it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't really have any big thoughts on the Urban Gentry. I think it's a good channel. I think he does some great things. I don't mind watching his videos. They're decent. They're good. They're decent videos. So, but overall, I don't have anything really negative to say. I mean, if you want to watch all the drama, there's just, man, YouTube's full of it. YouTube is full of drama. And I didn't even know there was drama in the watch community until a few months ago. Like when I was just I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole and I was watching some of the stuff that was posted, and I was just like, I'm like, oh my goodness, like what the heck's going on here? And I mean, because to me, it's like when you first start out in any sort of community, you don't realize there's drama and you think it's the best thing ever. Same thing with the Prelude community. Prelude community has so much drama. Like, oh my goodness, oh holy crap, that's a toxic, like just cesspool of drama. When like one of the reasons why I stopped really contributing to the community, at least the community pages on Facebook, sorry, a sidetrack, was because of the amount of drama. And I was just like, man, this is stupid. This is stupid. And it's like, it got so bad to the point where I was just like, I'm like, man, like literally it'd be like one guy posts, a bunch of people just start begging on him. Be like, oh, you're just trying to promote business, blah, blah, blah. Like shut up. Shut up. Oh, goodness. Okay. But no, there's watch drama, there's card drama, man. There's any kind of drama. Like people love drama. Why do you think they watch TV shows? Why do you think there's soap operas? Like it's just weird because it's a lot of guys, like middle-aged guys or whatever, and then Honda Crew's completely different. Like Preludes are different, but whatever. Like I don't know. It's a weird world. I don't really know where I'd go with that. But yeah. Oh. Okay, I got a couple more questions and I'll cut it off there because I believe that I want to keep this under an hour and I also have other stuff I need to get done. So, oh, okay. All right. So Jake says a lot of car communities are like that. In my opinion, I find watches to be much more chill. Yeah. Car communities can get especially toxic. Watch communities are a lot less toxic in my opinion. Just a personal opinion. Some people are going to be jumping on that train and be like, oh, car communities are the best place ever. I'm like, dude, car communities are the best place ever when you're 16, 17, 18. You have no idea. You show up at the meet and you think everybody's happy. You don't realize that there's so much drama going on and the guys over here don't want to talk to the guys over here because they have beef going on. They want to beat each other up, blah, 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 blah. And next thing you know, a fight breaks out because some idiot did something. And I'm like, oh my goodness, yeah. It's like people are like, why did you stop going to meets? I don't know, because a lot of them are just run by immature people who just want to showboat and rev their engines and do stupid junk. Like okay, like I guess maybe it's like I'm getting old. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm old. Maybe that's it. I don't really find that appealing. If I want to show off stuff, I don't just want to drive up with a car and just show off and be like, look at my car. Cool. No one cares. Instead, like people be like, "Oh, is this a super cool car?" I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. It's fun." Yeah, but no, watch communities generally tend to be more chill. There's less drama. When there is drama, it gets dealt with in a different way. I think so. There's a lot less. Watch communities put up with a lot less BS. That's what I would say. Yeah, they're more chill and they put up with a lot less BS. So it's like you're walking on a very thin rope, or you're walking a very thin, like obviously tightrope walking, but or thin ice, right? You're not there in the sense of like you don't just waste a ton of time and just goof off and do stupid stuff, right? You do stupid stuff with watch guys, they're gonna like be like, nope, bye, peace out. They're gonna kick you super fast, right? They're not gonna want you around if you just do stupid stuff. But I mean, generally speaking, it's a more I would say, and this is generalization. They say generalizations are generally true. So or did they say that? I can't remember. Anyways, but generally speaking, I would find watch enthusiasts to be more mature than car enthusiasts, or at least the audiences of them are. When it comes, I mean, I think the demographic is a little bit older. And I'm not saying there's not old car enthusiasts. There are, right? But it's they are generally more chill environments. That's generally the thing that I've kind of come across, and as Jake pointed out. All right, a couple other questions here. Okay, so okay, so budget-friendly watches. What would be some budget-friendly watches? Okay, so a couple budget-friendly watches I would just say right out of the gate. Some of the Seiko 5s, decent watches. The older ones per se, like the SNK models, I don't mind those. The newer ones are a little bit, because I'm like, they kind of replace the SKX, but they're not really like, they're better, but they're worse at the same time, if that makes sense. But for anything entry level, And I'm going to say like basically anything under, I would say anything really under about $1,000 is kind of what I quote unquote entry level. Anything under $500, I'd say is like, or I would say more or less entry level, and kind of 500 to about $1,000 Canadian. It's a little bit more kind of like mid to like high end of entry level, but anything entry level, I would say good pieces, good brands to look at. You go with, I mean, Citizen's decent, Seiko is decent, Orient, in my opinion, makes great bang for buck watches. Now, the only problem is when it comes to servicing, I know my watchmaker, he says the reason why he stopped selling Orient, he used to be an AD for Orient, is that he could not get parts for them. And Orient didn't really want to supply parts. So there's that, a little bit of an issue. However, realistically, I like Orient watches are great watches. I think the build quality is good. I think that they, to be honest, I think they are what Seiko used to be in the value department. So go look at Orient. The other brand that I would probably consider is Seagull. Seagull makes some really good watches for the price point. The only thing that I will say with Seagull is you're rolling the dice on quality control. Cheap pieces that have a lot of specs. And I'm not saying that Chinese watches are bad. I think that they've come a long way, right? And I mean, I don't think that the ST19 is a bad movement, or any like the 1960 chronograph. I don't think it's the bad movements in there. Good movement. They just have a lot of QC issues. And I mean, roll the dice. If you get a good one, great. If you don't, well, oopsies, right? But I think that Seagull makes some great watches for the price point. In fact, like I've sold a few. I've owned a couple. They were great watches. One of the coolest ones that I ever had was one of the moon phase watches. It was a big date, like a jumper, a big date, and then a moon phase, and it's automatic moon phase. And these things can be had for about about $500 Canadian, something like that. $500-600 Canadian. Whereas if you wanted the equivalency piece, and the actual movement was actually quite nicely finished for a display case back too. If you wanted that in a Swiss piece or a Japanese piece, you're looking at about $2,000 north of $2,000. So it's very like you get what you pay for, right? Obviously, even the materials of the stainless steel that they're using isn't the same like quality per se as like some of the stuff that the Swiss are using. I mean, we could talk about how the Swiss watch is actually outsourced to different parts of China or other parts of the world, and then just assembled in Switzerland or whatever. We're not going to talk about that, but I mean, Seagull watches are great watches, but they do sometimes have QC issues. Same with Seiko. Seiko sometimes has QC issues. Lower end pieces will have more QC issues than higher end pieces. It's just common sense. Once you start paying a lot more for certain pieces, the expectation is that you don't have these QC issues, if that makes sense. But overall, entry level pieces, I think that if you want to look at Hamilton, I love Hamilton as a company. Surprisingly, I've only ever owned one, but I would recommend them all the time to people. And I'm just talking about the khaki. To be honest, I think the khaki line is overplayed for a lot of people. I think they're great watches, but as an entry level piece, I think you can't go wrong with a Hamilton khaki. But I think the Jazzmaster lines are so nice dress watches for the price, man. For the price, they're so nice. It's certain, the quality isn't, it's not there compared to like something like Longines or Rado or, like Omega, but you're not paying Omega prices. You're not paying Rado prices. You're not paying Longines prices. You're paying sub $1,000 Canadian or just over $1,000 Canadian for one of these pieces. And I think that if you want a good quality dress watch that is going to be, that ticks basically other boxes, I say, how can you go wrong with one of those? But yeah, entry level pieces, nobody's going to there's some people will look down on you, but man, just buy whatever makes you happy. At the end of the day, it's your money. It's really what it is, right? I can provide advice, but hey, that's what I kind of think about, the entry level of pieces. And what I would, and where would, I guess one question I did forget that I shouldn't have connected or forgot per se was, where do you buy used? Like, where would you go to look for used watches? Okay, so when you're looking to buy used pieces, there's a couple different ways you can buy them. You can either buy them from a vendor or like an actual retail establishment that sells used timepieces, right? So there's an actual retail location that'll sell them. You could go. There's also pawn shops, although pawn shops are a little bit. But iffy. You might not know if they've been stolen, just hustled off the street, whatever. I mean, theoretically, with serial numbers and the stolen watches and stuff like that, but it is something that could occur. And I'm not saying that pawn shops don't have good inventory sometimes. I mean, sometimes people need money for them and they're just willing to pawn them. But yeah, but overall, they're not the best location to grab stuff, right? You can buy them from groups, forums that are selling used timepieces. That is another option. You could buy them from a place like, for instance, I sell used timepieces. I mean, if I had new stock, then I would technically be a gray market dealer. But no, I do specialize mostly in used timepieces. And I'd be happy to help you out. And I mean, it's something that I really like doing. I like helping people find the watches that they will actually really enjoy wearing. But yeah, so, and that's there's other people out there who do that. I can think of one of my buddies here in Edmonton, and runs another. He mostly deals with really high end pieces, but overall, I mean, where to buy them? You can buy them on Kijiji, you can buy them on Craigslist, you can buy them on eBay. But I would say be very careful. The amount of you don't want to get duped, right? Especially buying fakes. And I mean, we've seen now fake Orients. It wasn't just fake Rolexes, fake Omegas, fake Tag Heuers. I see a ton of fake Tag Heuers. People offering me stuff. Tons and tons of fake Tag Heuers. It's ridiculous. Okay. And I don't know, man. But where to buy them? It's always, buy the seller. Really, if the seller is a chill guy who super awesome, who doesn't seem like he's a really sketchy guy, dude. If you're meeting him in like a back alley and he wants to sell you, like some really nice watch, probably not the best thing for you, man. Like, just think about it. Do your research, do your homework. Look for stuff. There's also, like, for instance, the Omega Enthusiast. He sells vintage pieces, but buying used pieces. Always be prepared to just keep a little bit of extra cash just in case something doesn't work. And perhaps, you have to go get it serviced, right? I mean, obviously with the pieces I sell, I try and, check really, really carefully to make sure that everything's good to go. And if it was like, for instance, if it was a piece that was like vintage, I just sell it like, everything's sold as is, right? But if it's vintage, I try to make sure that, it's running within a certain tolerance, right? Before I want to offload it. I wouldn't want to sell junk product, right? And that's my thing, is I stand behind my name. I think my reputation means something. So, but anyways, where you buy cool stuff, where you buy used stuff, hey, world's your oyster. You got the internet. Hopefully I gave you a couple of ideas, but yeah. Oh boy, I think we're coming up on an hour here. Yeah, I think, okay. Question that I got asked: why do we not see your BMW in any videos? The reason why you don't really see a whole lot of my BMW is just because it's mostly a winter car, and I drive it mostly in the winter. I don't really drive it in the summer, and I thought the focus really on the channel would mostly be my Prelude. The BMW is a lot of fun. I've made a couple of videos about it. Will it be featured in anything in the future? Maybe. I will be doing a little bit of body work to it, but I mean, overall, it's a really fun car. But I didn't really plan on putting a lot of stuff in the video, or like not in the video, sorry, but on the channel about the car. I could, and I don't mind doing that. But hey, I guess, the biggest thing is for this channel is I don't like to think of it as just a me thing. I want to think about it as like an us thing, right? So anyways, realistically, there should be more stuff coming down the pipeline, but I can't really give you an exact date on what or when. Another question that I was asked was, what is going on with the Prelude, and why have we not seen a video on it for a little while? Realistically, the thing with the Prelude is that it costs a lot of money to try and get stuff done, right? I'm not one of those people who wants to be blogging or vlogging every single day about what's going on with my car and be like, today I did this, today I did that. Realistically, I'm kind of the guy who really just likes to start up the engine, drive off to where you're supposed to be doing, have fun, and go home, right? Go home, do whatever you need. But I'm not going to make like daily videos being like, oh, this is what I'm doing with my car today, blah, 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 like that. I'm not really that kind of YouTuber, and I wouldn't even really consider myself a YouTuber, right? But like I'm not really interested in doing that kind of vlogging like on the daily about what's going on. So if you're expecting that from there, it probably is not going to happen. Okay, so last thing. I did get asked this by one of my friends. I actually been asked a couple of times by my friends. will you be doing a day in the life of Shane or Massey, whatever you want to call it? Yeah, I can do it. I can do one vlog, one off. We'll see how popular it is. Maybe it's cool. Maybe it won't be. Maybe we'll see what's going on. But it's vlogging, and I don't know about that. It's something that it doesn't necessarily interest me the most, but we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. Overall, I think it's also just one of those things that's really time consuming. Like, you're dragging a camera everywhere you go. But anyways, we'll see about that. I don't really have any quarrels against doing that, but my water's out and I actually have to go meet a friend in about half an hour. So I better cut this one short. Thank you to all the questions, or the people that asked all these questions, and everybody who tuned in. I do know the chat bar was a little dead today, which whatever. Sometimes it's busy, sometimes it's dead. But hey, thank you very much, and I will see you later. I will try and get out a video. I mean, I'm kind of going through like a creative slump a little bit, but I will be trying to get out a video, probably at least one each week. In terms, and I'll probably try to be doing live streaming at least once a week here too. So, anyways, out of the way, I'll leave it off there. So take care. You guys have a fantastic day. See you later.